The morning sun cast long shadows across the school track as Sarah Martinez laced up her worn running shoes. The rubber soles had seen better days, with holes starting to form near the toes, but they were all her family could afford. At 17, Sarah had grown accustomed to making do with less, but today felt different. Today was the day of the 800-meter fitness test that would determine who made it onto the varsity track team. Sarah had been dreaming of this moment for months. She had watched from the sidelines as the popular girls dominated the track, their expensive running gear gleaming under the stadium lights during competitions. They moved with a confidence that seemed to come naturally, their ponytails swaying in perfect rhythm as they conquered lap after lap. Sarah wanted nothing more than to be part of that world, to feel the rush of competition and the pride of representing her school. But as she stretched her muscles near the starting line, she could already hear the whispers beginning. Emma Richardson, the current 800-meter champion and undisputed queen of the track team, stood with her group of friends, their matching team warm-up suits a stark contrast to Sarah's faded gym clothes. Emma's father had been a professional runner, and her mother had competed in college. Running was literally in her blood, and she never let anyone forget it. "Look who decided to show up," Emma said loudly enough for others to hear. "Did someone tell the charity case that tryouts were today?" Her friends giggled, their laughter cutting through the morning air like sharp glass. Sarah felt her cheeks burn, but she kept her eyes focused on her shoelaces, double-knotting them with trembling fingers. Coach Williams blew his whistle, calling all the hopefuls to gather around. He was a stern man in his 50s who had been coaching track for over 2 decades. His weathered face showed years of early morning practices and countless meets, but his eyes still held the passion for the sport that had driven him since his own high school days. "Ladies, today's 800-meter test will determine the final spots on our varsity roster," he announced, his voice carrying across the track. "I'm looking for heart, determination, and raw speed. Times matter, but they're not everything. I want to see who wants this more than anything else in the world." Sarah's heart hammered against her ribs as she took her position in lane 7, the outside lane that was typically reserved for the slowest qualifiers. Emma, naturally, was in lane 4, the coveted center position. As Sarah crouched into her starting position, she could hear more whispers from the small crowd of students who had gathered to watch. "$5 says she doesn't even finish," someone called out. "Look at those shoes. They're going to fall apart before she hits the first turn." More laughter erupted, and Sarah felt her confidence wavering. Maybe they were right. Maybe she didn't belong here with these girls who had been training since they were children, who had personal coaches and nutritionists and every advantage money could buy. But then she remembered why she was here. She thought about her younger brother Miguel, who had been diagnosed with asthma when he was 8. She remembered all the nights she had spent researching running techniques at the public library because they couldn't afford internet at home. She thought about her mother, who worked 2 jobs to keep their small apartment and still found time to drive Sarah to every practice session at the local community center. The starting gun felt like it took forever to fire. When it finally did, the sharp crack echoed across the track, and the runners burst forward like a collection of coiled springs suddenly released. Sarah found herself immediately falling behind the pack, her stride feeling awkward and uncertain compared to the smooth, practiced movements of her competitors. Emma took the lead from the start, her form textbook perfect as she glided around the first turn. Her breathing was controlled, her arms pumping in perfect rhythm. Behind her, 3 other girls maintained a tight formation, clearly experienced in race tactics and pacing. Sarah, meanwhile, struggled to find her rhythm, her breathing already becoming labored as they approached the 200-meter mark. "Come on, scholarship girl," someone yelled from the stands. "Show us what food stamps can do." The cruel laughter that followed nearly broke Sarah's concentration completely. She stumbled slightly, her worn shoes slipping on the track surface, and for a moment she considered stopping right there. It would be easier to walk off the track, to accept that some dreams were simply too big for some people. But something deep inside her refused to quit. As they rounded the far turn, now halfway through the race, Sarah began to find something she didn't know existed within her. Her breathing, while still heavy, started to settle into a pattern. Her stride began to lengthen, and she could feel her body warming to the challenge in a way she had never experienced before. The gap between Sarah and the lead pack was substantial, nearly 30 meters, but she started to close it slowly. Her worn shoes, which had been the source of so much mockery, seemed to grip the track with determination. Each step felt more natural than the last, as if she was discovering a part of herself that had been dormant her entire life. Emma maintained her lead through the 600-meter mark, but Sarah could see that some of the other girls were beginning to fade. The brutal pace Emma had set was taking its toll, and 3 of the original frontrunners were now breathing heavily, their form beginning to deteriorate. Sarah, on the other hand, felt like she was just hitting her stride. As they entered the final 200 meters, something remarkable happened. Sarah's body seemed to shift into a gear she didn't know existed. Her legs, which should have been screaming with fatigue, instead felt strong and powerful. Her lungs, which should have been burning with oxygen debt, drew in air with surprising ease. She began to move through the field like a runner possessed. One by one, she passed the girls who had been ahead of her. First, she overtook Jessica Chun, whose early pace had been too aggressive. Then, she moved past Lauren Davis and Amanda Foster, both of whom were now struggling with the demands of the final kick. With 100 meters to go, only Emma remained ahead of her. The crowd, which had been mocking Sarah just minutes before, had fallen silent. Even the most cynical observers could see that something special was happening. Sarah's form, while not technically perfect, had a raw power and natural efficiency that couldn't be taught. She moved with the unconscious grace of a natural athlete discovering her gift for the first time. Emma, hearing footsteps behind her, glanced over her shoulder, and her eyes widened in disbelief. The girl in the tattered shoes and faded clothes was not only still in the race, she was gaining ground with every stride. Emma's carefully controlled breathing became slightly ragged as she tried to respond to this unexpected challenge. With 50 meters to the finish line, Sarah pulled alongside Emma. The 2 girls ran stride for stride, their feet hitting the track in perfect synchronization. Emma's face showed the strain of trying to maintain her lead, while Sarah wore an expression of pure joy and discovery. She wasn't just running anymore, she was flying. In the final 10 meters, Sarah edged ahead. Her finish was not the carefully calculated sprint of an experienced racer, but rather the explosive burst of someone who had found their calling. She crossed the finish line 2 full strides ahead of Emma, her arms raised not in practiced victory, but in pure, unfiltered amazement at what she had just accomplished. The track fell silent except for the sound of Sarah's breathing and the soft beep of Coach Williams' stopwatch. He stared at the device in his hands, then looked up at Sarah, then back down at the watch. He pressed the reset button and checked it again, as if the numbers displayed couldn't possibly be accurate. "What was my time?" Sarah asked, still breathing heavily but grinning from ear to ear. The other girls gathered around, their earlier mockery replaced by curious silence. Even Emma stood nearby, her face a mixture of shock and grudging respect. Coach Williams looked up from his stopwatch, his expression unreadable. 2 minutes, 12 seconds, he said quietly. Then, louder, he repeated, 2 minutes and 12 seconds. The significance of this time was not immediately apparent to Sarah, but the gasp that arose from the small crowd told her it was something special. Emma's personal best, which had stood as the school record for 2 years, was 2:15. Sarah had just broken it by 3 full seconds in her very first official 800-meter race. But Sarah didn't know about school records or personal bests. She only knew that she had found something inside herself that felt like coming home. As she walked slowly around the track to cool down, her mind was already racing ahead, wondering what else she might be capable of. The worn shoes that had been the subject of so much ridicule suddenly felt like the most precious things she owned. The other girls on the track began to disperse, but Emma lingered. She approached Sarah slowly, her expression complicated. She paused, searching for words. That was really good running. It wasn't exactly an apology for the earlier mockery, but it was acknowledgement, and, for now, that was enough. Coach Williams caught up with Sarah as she finished her cool-down walk. "Sarah," he said, his voice serious but not unkind, "we need to talk. That time you just ran, it's not just fast for our school. It's fast for our state. It's the kind of time that gets college scouts' attention." Sarah looked at him with confusion. "College scouts?" she asked. "What do you mean?" "I mean," Coach Williams said, "that if you're serious about this, if you're willing to work harder than you've ever worked at anything in your life, you might just have a future in this sport. A future that could change everything for you and your family." As Sarah walked toward the locker room, her mind spinning with possibilities she had never dared to consider, she didn't notice the figure watching her from the stands. Janet Morrison, a former Olympic runner who now worked as a talent scout for a major university, had been visiting her alma mater when she heard about the impromptu time trial. She had arrived just in time to witness Sarah's remarkable performance. Janet had seen thousands of young runners over her career, but there was something about Sarah that reminded her of herself at that age. It wasn't just the raw speed, though that was certainly impressive. It was the heart, the refusal to quit when everything seemed impossible. It was the kind of inner fire that separated good athletes from great ones. As Sarah disappeared into the locker room, still unaware of the magnitude of what she had just accomplished, Janet pulled out her phone and began making calls. There were people who needed to know about the girl who had just announced herself as a serious contender, the girl who had turned mockery into motivation and doubt into determination. Sarah's journey was just beginning, but she had taken the first step towards something that would transform not just her own life, but inspire countless others who had ever been told they didn't belong. The girl who had been mocked for her worn shoes and humble beginnings had just served notice that heart and determination could triumph over privilege and expectation. The laughter that had echoed across the track that morning had been silenced, replaced by the sound of a new chapter beginning. Sara Martinez had found her calling, and the running world was about to discover a talent that would redefine what was possible for a girl from the wrong side of town with nothing but dreams and an unbreakable will to succeed. The weeks following Sarah's breakthrough performance at the 800-meter trial felt like stepping into a completely different world. Coach Williams had wasted no time in designing a training program specifically for her, and Janet Morrison, the college scout who had witnessed her race, had become a regular presence at practices. Sarah found herself thrust into a level of athletic commitment she had never imagined possible. Her days now began at 5 in the morning with a gentle 6-mile run through the quiet streets of her neighborhood. The early morning air was crisp and clean, and Sarah discovered that she loved the solitude of these solo runs. It gave her time to think, to process the dramatic changes happening in her life, and to simply enjoy the pure rhythm of her feet hitting the pavement. The contrast between her morning runs and the afternoon track sessions couldn't have been more dramatic. While her solo runs were peaceful and meditative, practice sessions were intense, technical, and often brutal. Coach Williams had brought in Maria Santos, a former collegiate middle-distance runner, to work specifically with Sarah on her form and race tactics. Maria was a small woman with graying hair and eyes that missed nothing. She had competed in the 1996 Olympics and understood the mental game of middle-distance running as well as anyone. From the moment she first watched Sarah run, she knew she was dealing with someone special, but she also knew that raw talent alone would never be enough. You run like someone who learned by watching and feeling, not by being taught, Maria told Sarah during their first technical session. That's given you some natural instincts that many runners never develop, but it's also created some inefficiencies that we need to address. The technical work was harder than any physical training Sarah had ever endured. Maria broke down every aspect of her running form, from the angle of her foot strike to the position of her shoulders. She taught Sarah about race tactics, about when to surge and when to sit back, about reading the fatigue in other runners' faces and using it to her advantage. But, perhaps most importantly, Maria began to educate Sarah about the broader world of competitive running. She explained the difference between high school times and collegiate standards, between regional competitions and national championships. She showed Sarah videos of Olympic races, pointing out the subtle tactical moves that separated good runners from great ones. Your 2:12 for 800 meters is impressive, Maria explained one afternoon as they reviewed race footage. But to compete at the highest levels, you'll need to run under 2:05. That might not sound like much of a difference, but those 7 seconds represent a quantum leap in training intensity, mental toughness, and tactical sophistication. Sarah absorbed this information with the hunger of someone who had discovered her life's purpose. She studied race videos in her spare time, reading everything she could find about training methods and nutrition. Her mother, Maria Martinez, initially worried about Sarah's sudden obsession with running, but she quickly recognized that this was more than just a teenage phase. Maria Martinez had worked as a housekeeper at the local hospital for 15 years, often pulling double shifts to support her family. She had watched Sarah struggle through school, not because she lacked intelligence, but because she had never found anything that truly captured her passion. Seeing her daughter's transformation was both thrilling and terrifying. "Mija," she said one evening as Sarah studied race tactics at their small kitchen table, "you know I support your dreams, but we need to be realistic. What if this running thing doesn't work out? You still need to focus on your grades. on having a backup plan. Sarah looked up from her notebook, where she had been sketching out different race scenarios. Mom, I know this seems crazy, but I can feel it inside me. This is what I'm supposed to be doing. Coach Williams thinks I might be able to get a college scholarship. A full scholarship, Mom. Can you imagine what that would mean for our family? The mention of a scholarship caused Maria Martinez to pause. She had worked multiple jobs for years, dreaming of the day she might be able to send her children to college. But the financial reality had always seemed impossible. The idea that Sarah's running might open that door was almost too good to believe. Meanwhile, at school, Sarah's social dynamic was shifting in ways she hadn't anticipated. Her stunning performance at the 800-meter trial had earned her a spot on the varsity team, but it had also created tension with some of the other runners. Emma Richardson, in particular, struggled with being displaced as the team's middle-distance star. Emma had been accustomed to being the center of attention, the athlete that college scouts came to see. Now, suddenly, she found herself playing second fiddle to a girl who had been a virtual unknown just weeks before. The adjustment was difficult, and Emma's responses weren't always gracious. It's easy to run fast when you don't have any pressure, Emma muttered to her friends after a particularly impressive workout by Sarah. Let's see how she handles it when there are real stakes involved, when college coaches are actually watching and taking notes. But Sarah was developing her own support system. Miguel, her younger brother, had become her biggest fan and unofficial training assistant. Despite his asthma, he insisted on timing her workouts and keeping detailed records of her progress. His enthusiasm was infectious, and he helped Sarah maintain perspective when the pressure began to build. You know what's cool about watching you run? Miguel told her one afternoon as they walked home from practice. You look like you're flying, but also like you're exactly where you're supposed to be. Like running isn't something you do, it's something you are. These words, coming from her 13-year-old brother, hit Sarah more profoundly than any technical advice from her coaches. Miguel had captured something essential about her relationship with running that she hadn't been able to articulate herself. As the weeks passed, Sarah's training intensified. Maria Santos introduced her to interval training, teaching her to run repeated 400-meter segments at different speeds to develop both her aerobic capacity and her finishing kick. These sessions were brutally demanding, but Sarah found that she actually enjoyed the challenge of pushing her body to its limits. The mental aspect of training proved to be just as important as the physical conditioning. Maria worked with Sarah on visualization techniques, teaching her to imagine herself in different race scenarios. They practiced response strategies for various tactical situations. What to do if the pace started too slowly, how to respond to a sudden surge by a competitor, when to make her own move for the lead. Racing is chess at 90% of maximum heart rate, Maria explained during one of these mental training sessions. You need to be making tactical decisions while your body is screaming for oxygen and your muscles are flooding with lactic acid. The only way to get good at that is to practice it over and over until it becomes instinct. Sarah's first real test came at the regional qualifying meet 6 weeks after her initial breakthrough. This was a much larger competition than anything she had previously experienced, with runners from over 30 high schools competing for spots at the state championship. The atmosphere was electric, with college scouts scattered throughout the stands, and the kind of professional timing systems that Sarah had only seen on television. The morning of the race, Sarah felt a knot of nervousness in her stomach that she had never experienced before. This was different from the casual anxiety she had felt before the school-time trial. This was the pressure of real expectations, of knowing that people were watching specifically to see what she could do. Coach Williams found her sitting alone in the warm-up area, staring at her spikes with an expression of deep concentration. Nervous? He asked, settling down beside her. Terrified, Sarah admitted. What if that first race was just a fluke? What if I can't do it again when it really matters? You want to know what I think? Coach Williams said. I think you're about to discover something important about yourself. Not just about how fast you can run, but about who you are when the pressure is highest and the stakes are real. As Sarah began her warm-up routine, she noticed the other competitors eyeing her with a mixture of curiosity and skepticism. Word had spread about the unknown runner who had burst onto the scene with a remarkable time, but many of the more established athletes remained doubtful about her credentials. Rebecca Thompson, the defending state champion from Northern Valley High, was particularly dismissive. Rebecca had been running competitively since she was 10 years old and had never been seriously challenged by someone with Sarah's limited experience. I heard about your little time trial, Rebecca said as they both stretched near the track. Cute story, but this is real racing. This is where you find out if you belong or if you were just having a lucky day. Sarah felt the familiar sting of dismissal, but this time it didn't crush her confidence the way it had during those early days. Instead, she found herself drawing strength from the doubt. She had been underestimated before, and she had turned that skepticism into fuel. The call for the 800-meter runners came sooner than Sarah expected. As she walked toward the starting line, she could see Maria Santos in the stands, her former coach's face showing calm confidence. Janet Morrison was there too, clipboard in hand, ready to evaluate whether Sarah's early promise could translate into consistent performance. Sarah was assigned lane 6, a middle position that would allow her to see most of the field, but would also require her to navigate traffic if she wanted to move up during the race. As she settled into her starting blocks, she closed her eyes briefly and visualized the race plan that she and Maria had developed. The start would be conservative, finding position in the middle of the pack and letting the early pace develop naturally. At 400 meters, she would reassess, staying patient unless the pace was unusually slow. The real race would begin with 300 meters to go, when she would move to the outside and begin her sustained drive to the finish. The starting gun cracked, and the field moved out smoothly. Sarah executed her race plan perfectly, settling into 6th place as they passed the 200-meter mark. The early pace felt comfortable, perhaps even a bit slow, which played to her strength as a strong finisher. Rebecca Thompson had taken the early lead, her race strategy clearly focused on controlling the pace from the front. Behind her, a tight pack of 5 runners maintained contact, waiting for someone to make the first significant move. Sarah sat just outside this group, patient and relaxed, her breathing controlled and her form efficient. As they passed the 400-meter split in 64 seconds, Sarah knew the pace was definitely conservative for a race of this caliber. This meant the final 400 would be fast, with multiple runners capable of a strong finishing kick. She would need to position herself carefully for the inevitable sprint to the finish. With 300 meters to go, exactly as planned, Sarah began to move. She swung wide to the outside and started her sustained drive, passing the back of the pack with smooth acceleration. Her legs felt strong, her breathing remained controlled, and for the first time in the race, she began to truly believe she belonged in this field. Rebecca Thompson, seeing movement in her peripheral vision, responded by picking up her own pace. She had expected to be challenged, but not by the unknown runner from the outside lanes. As Sarah moved into 4th place, then 3rd, then 2nd, Rebecca found herself in the unfamiliar position of being hunted rather than hunting. The final 100 meters became a spectacular duel between experience and emerging talent. Rebecca threw everything she had into maintaining her lead, her form beginning to show the strain of her front-running tactics combined with a desperate finishing kick. Sarah, meanwhile, seemed to find another gear entirely. With 50 meters to go, Sarah pulled alongside Rebecca. The two runners were stride for stride, their footfalls perfectly synchronized, their breathing audible to the crowd. Rebecca's face showed the grimace of maximum effort, while Sarah wore the expression of someone discovering the true extent of her capabilities. In the final 20 meters, Sarah edged ahead. Her victory wasn't the dramatic breakthrough of her first race, but rather the methodical triumph of superior fitness and tactical execution. She crossed the finish line 2 meters ahead of Rebecca, her time flashing on the scoreboard, 2 minutes and 9.47 seconds. This time, Sarah understood the significance immediately. She had not only won her first major competition, she had run a time that would rank her among the top 10 high school 800-meter runners in the country. The small crowd erupted, and Sarah could see Maria Santos jumping up and down in the stands, her usual composed demeanor abandoned in favor of pure joy. Coach Williams reached her first, wrapping her in a hug that lifted her off the ground. That, he said, was the race of a champion. You didn't just run fast, you raced smart. You handled the pressure, you executed your race plan, and you delivered when it mattered most. As Sarah jogged slowly around the track for her cool down, she reflected on how much had changed in just 6 weeks. The girl who had been mocked for her worn shoes and humble background had just defeated some of the most highly recruited runners in the region. She had proven that her initial breakthrough was no fluke, that she possessed not just speed but the mental toughness required for elite competition. But, perhaps most importantly, Sarah had discovered something about herself that went beyond running. She had learned that she possessed an inner strength that could transform adversity into motivation, doubt into determination. The laughter that had once threatened to break her spirit had instead forged it into something unbreakable. As she completed her cool down and headed toward the team tent, Sarah caught sight of a familiar figure waiting near the edge of the track. Janet Morrison approached with a smile and an expression that suggested important news. "Sarah," Janet said, "I've been making some phone calls. There are some people who would very much like to meet you." The phone calls Janet Morrison had mentioned turned out to be from college coaches across the country who had heard about the unknown runner making waves in regional competitions. Within a week of Sarah's victory at regionals, their small apartment mailbox was stuffed with recruiting letters from universities she had only seen on television during March Madness. Stanford University, University of Oregon, University of Colorado, Duke University. The names read like a catalog of American higher education's most prestigious institutions. Each letter contained the same basic message. They wanted to offer Sarah a full athletic scholarship to join their track and field program. For a family that had struggled to pay monthly rent, the concept of a free college education seemed almost too good to be true. Sarah's mother, Maria Martinez, sat at their kitchen table surrounded by dozens of unopened letters, shaking her head in amazement. "Mija, I don't understand how this is possible. 6 months ago, you had never run a serious race in your life. Now universities are offering to pay for your education." Sarah was equally overwhelmed by the sudden attention. She had gone from being completely unknown to being one of the most sought-after high school distance runners in the country. The transformation was exciting, but also terrifying. With each new letter, the pressure to perform grew exponentially. Coach Williams and Maria Santos worked together to help Sarah navigate the recruiting process. They explained the differences between various college programs, the academic requirements she would need to meet, and the long-term implications of her choice. It was a crash course in a world that none of them had experience with. "The most important thing," Maria Santos emphasized, "is that you choose a program where you can continue to improve. You're still developing as a runner, Sarah. Your best races are ahead of you, not behind you. You need coaches who understand that and who have experience developing young talent." The recruiting visits began in earnest during Sarah's senior year. Her first official visit was to the University of Colorado, nestled in the foothills of the Rocky Mountains. The altitude and stunning scenery were impressive, but what struck Sarah most was the dedication and professionalism of the training program. Dr. Jennifer Walsh, the head distance coach at Colorado, had competed in 2 Olympic Games during the 1990s and had coached 3 runners to sub-2:00 800-meter times. She was exactly the kind of mentor Sarah needed to take her running to the next level. "What I see in you," Dr. Walsh told Sarah as they toured the training facilities, "is someone who is just beginning to understand their potential. Your current times are impressive, but I believe you're capable of much more. The question is whether you're willing to commit to the level of training required to find out what your limits really are." The Colorado facilities were unlike anything Sarah had ever seen. The training center featured an indoor track, an altitude chamber for specialized conditioning, and recovery pools maintained at precise temperatures. The academic support system was equally impressive, with tutors available specifically for student athletes, and flexible scheduling to accommodate training and competition demands. But it was the other runners on the team who truly convinced Sarah that Colorado might be the right choice. She met Jessica Kim, a sophomore from California who had struggled with similar self-doubt despite her obvious talent. Jessica's story of growth and development under Dr. Walsh's guidance resonated strongly with Sarah's own aspirations. "When I first got here," Jessica explained as they jogged easily around the campus, "I was intimidated by everyone and everything. I felt like I didn't belong, like I was some kind of mistake in the recruiting process." Dr. Walsh helped me understand that feeling out of place is normal when you're pushing yourself to grow. The visit to Oregon provided a completely different, but equally compelling vision. The university's track and field program was legendary, with a history of producing Olympic champions and world record holders. The facilities were state-of-the-art, and the coaching staff included several former professional athletes. But what impressed Sarah most about Oregon was the program's focus on the mental aspects of competition. They had a full-time sports psychologist on staff and emphasized the development of race tactics and strategic thinking. Given Sarah's relative inexperience with high-level competition, this focus on the mental game seemed particularly valuable. Coach Mike Patterson, Oregon's middle-distance specialist, had coached 2 Olympic medalists and understood the unique challenges faced by late-developing athletes. "The beauty of your situation," he told Sarah, is that you haven't been over-raced or burned out by years of intense competition. Your body and mind are fresh, which gives us tremendous room for growth. The decision-making process was complicated by Sarah's academic interests as well. While she had initially focused primarily on the athletic aspects of each program, her guidance counselor reminded her that she would be a student first and an athlete second. The quality of education and the opportunities for life after running were equally important considerations. Stanford University emerged as a unique option that combined academic excellence with a strong track program. The school's reputation for producing successful graduates in fields ranging from technology to medicine appealed to Sarah's practical nature. She knew that while running might open doors, education would determine what she did once those doors were open. The Stanford campus visit was intimidating in its own way. The academic standards were higher than any of the other schools she had considered, and the student body seemed to consist entirely of overachievers who excelled in multiple areas simultaneously. Sarah wondered if she would be able to keep up academically while maintaining the training schedule required for elite-level competition. Dr. Sarah Chun, Stanford's distance coach, addressed these concerns directly during their meeting. "We recruit student-athletes who are exceptional in multiple areas," she explained. "Our experience has shown that people who excel in athletics often have the discipline and time management skills necessary for academic success as well. We'll provide support, but we expect you to thrive in both areas." As the recruiting visits continued, Sarah found herself torn between several excellent options. Each program offered unique advantages, and she could envision herself succeeding at any of them. The abundance of choices, while flattering, made the decision-making process incredibly difficult. The turning point came during her visit to Duke University in North Carolina. The campus was beautiful, the academic reputation was outstanding, and the track program had a strong history of developing middle-distance runners. But it was a conversation with Dr. Michael Roberts, the program's sports science specialist, that crystallized Sarah's thinking about her future. "Let me ask you something," Dr. Roberts said as they reviewed her training logs and race results. "What do you think your ultimate potential might be? Not just in college, but beyond. Are you interested in competing professionally, or is college running the endpoint of your athletic career?" The question caught Sarah off guard. In all the excitement of college recruiting, she hadn't seriously considered the possibility that her running career might extend beyond university competition. The idea of professional running, of making a living as an athlete, seemed impossibly distant and ambitious. "I honestly don't know," Sarah admitted. 6 months ago, I didn't even know I could run competitively at all. The idea of running professionally seems like something that happens to other people, not to someone like me." Dr. Roberts smiled at her honesty. "That's exactly the right attitude at this stage of your development. You're focused on the process rather than getting ahead of yourself with unrealistic expectations. But I want you to understand that your current trajectory suggests possibilities that go well beyond college competition." He showed Sarah a detailed analysis of her training response and competitive performances. The data revealed improvement patterns that were characteristic of athletes with exceptional natural ability who had started serious training relatively late in their development. "Most elite runners begin specialized training as children," Dr. Roberts explained. "They develop quickly initially, but often plateau in their late teens or early 20s because they've been pushing their bodies for so many years. You, on the other hand, are just beginning to tap into your potential. Your improvement curve suggests that your best performances are still years away." This perspective shift changed how Sarah viewed her college decision. Instead of simply choosing a school where she could be successful for 4 years, she began thinking about which program would best prepare her for whatever came next. The conversation with Dr. Roberts had opened up possibilities she hadn't dared to consider. Back home, Sarah discussed the recruiting process with her family and coaches. The decision ultimately came down to a choice between Stanford and Colorado, two programs that offered different but equally compelling visions for her future development. Stanford appealed to her practical nature and her desire for academic excellence. The school's reputation would open doors regardless of how her athletic career progressed, and the coaching staff had experience helping athletes balance high-level competition with demanding academic schedules. Colorado, however, offered something that felt more aligned with her primary passion. The program's focus on pure athletic development, combined with the inspiring training environment of the Rocky Mountains, promised the kind of immersive experience that might unlock her full potential as a runner. The final factor in her decision was unexpected. During her last phone conversation with Dr. Walsh from Colorado, The coach mentioned something that resonated deeply with Sarah's background and motivation. "One of the things I love about our program," Dr. Walsh said, "is that we have athletes from every conceivable background. Some come from families of runners. Others discovered the sport late like you did. What unites them all is a hunger to find out how good they can become. That hunger is more important than any other factor in determining success." That night, Sarah made her decision. She would attend the University of Colorado on a full athletic scholarship, majoring in biology with the goal of eventually attending medical school. The decision felt right in a way that transcended rational analysis. It was the choice that excited her most and challenged her in the ways she most wanted to be challenged. The announcement of her college choice generated significant local media attention. Sarah had become something of a local celebrity, the girl who had gone from unknown to nationally recruited in less than a year. Local newspapers ran feature stories about her journey, and she was invited to speak at youth programs about pursuing dreams despite obstacles. But even as she enjoyed the recognition, Sarah remained focused on the work still ahead of her. She had one more season of high school competition before heading to Colorado, and she was determined to make it memorable. The state championship meet was approaching, and she had unfinished business to address. Emma Richardson, her former teammate and early critic, had also committed to a major university program. The rivalry between them had evolved from hostility to mutual respect, but there remained an edge to their competition that promised fireworks at the state meet. "You know," Emma said to Sarah after a routine training session, "I used to think you were just lucky. That first race where you came out of nowhere, I thought it was a fluke. But watching you develop this season, I have to admit I was wrong. You're the real deal." The acknowledgement from Emma meant more to Sarah than any newspaper article or recruiting letter. It represented recognition from someone who truly understood the sport and the level of commitment required for success. It was validation from a peer rather than an adult, which somehow carried more weight. As Sarah prepared for her final high school season, she reflected on the incredible journey of the past year. The girl who had been mocked for her worn shoes and humble background had transformed into one of the most promising young distance runners in the country. But more than that, she had discovered something about herself that went beyond athletic ability. She had learned that talent without opportunity was meaningless, but that when opportunity presented itself, preparation and determination could overcome almost any obstacle. She had discovered that the opinions of others, while sometimes painful, had no power to define her unless she allowed them to. Most importantly, Sarah had learned that her story was still being written. The early chapters had been dramatic and inspiring, but the most important parts lay ahead. College would bring new challenges, new competitions, and new opportunities to grow. The question was no longer whether she belonged at the highest levels of the sport. That had been answered definitively. The question now was how far her unique combination of natural talent, late development, and unshakable determination would ultimately take her. As she laced up her running shoes for another training session, Sarah smiled at the knowledge that the best parts of her story were still to come. The laughter that had once threatened to derail her dreams had instead become the foundation for something extraordinary. Every step forward was a testament to the power of believing in yourself even when no one else does, and every race was an opportunity to inspire others who might be listening to their own chorus of doubters. Sarah Martinez was no longer running away from mockery. She was running toward a future that held possibilities she was only beginning to imagine. The thin mountain air of Boulder, Colorado hit Sarah's lungs like a cold slap during her first training run at altitude. At 5,430 feet above sea level, the University of Colorado's campus sat in a natural training laboratory that had produced countless elite endurance athletes. For Sarah, who had spent her entire life at sea level, the adjustment was both physically challenging and psychologically daunting. Dr. Jennifer Walsh had warned her about the initial difficulties of altitude adaptation, but experiencing it firsthand was different than any academic preparation could have provided. Sarah's usual easy pace felt labored, her breathing was noticeably more difficult, and her recovery between intervals took significantly longer than she was accustomed to. "Everyone struggles with this initially," reassured Tom Chun, a senior on the team who had become Sarah's unofficial mentor during her first weeks on campus. Tom had experienced his own journey from unknown high school runner to NCAA championship contender, and he understood the unique challenges Sarah faced as she transitioned to college-level training. "The key," Tom explained as they jogged slowly through the foothills surrounding campus, "is to be patient with yourself. Your body is adapting to more than just the altitude. The training volume here is different, the competition level is different, and the academic demands are unlike anything you've experienced before. It takes time to find your rhythm. Sarah's transition to college academics proved to be every bit as challenging as her athletic adjustment. Her biology courses were rigorous and demanding, requiring a level of independent study and critical thinking that pushed her intellectual boundaries. The pre-medical track she had chosen was notoriously difficult, with many students struggling to balance the academic workload with other commitments. Her academic advisor, Dr. Patricia Summers, recognized the unique challenges faced by student-athletes in demanding majors. The key to success, Dr. Summers explained during one of their early meetings, is developing exceptional time management skills and learning to maximize the efficiency of your study time. You'll have fewer hours available than other students, but that constraint can actually work in your favor by forcing you to focus. Sarah's first collegiate race came at a small invitational meet in early October, 6 weeks after arriving on campus. Dr. Walsh had entered her conservatively in the 1,500-meter event rather than her usual 800-meter distance, reasoning that the longer race would better suit her current fitness level and provide valuable tactical experience. The field included several nationally ranked runners, and Sarah found herself both excited and nervous as she prepared for what would be her first true test against elite collegiate competition. The warm-up area buzzed with athletes who carried themselves with the confidence that came from years of success at the highest levels of the sport. Remember, Dr. Walsh advised as Sarah went through her pre-race routine, this is about learning, not winning. I want you to experience racing at this level, to understand the pace and tactics, but don't put pressure on yourself to achieve any specific result. Your job today is to compete intelligently and gain experience. The early pace of the 1,500-meter race was considerably faster than anything Sarah had experienced in high school. The field went through the first 400 meters in 68 seconds, a pace that would have been competitive for the entire distance in many of her previous races. Sarah found herself in the middle of a large pack, working to stay relaxed while her body adapted to the demanding rhythm. At 800 meters, passed in 2:18, Sarah began to feel more comfortable. Her breathing had settled into a sustainable pattern, and her legs felt strong despite the fast pace. She had moved up slightly in the field and found herself in excellent position as the race entered its crucial final phase. The final 400 meters of the race was a revelation for Sarah. As the pace increased and several runners began to fade, she discovered that she had another gear available. Her finishing kick, which had been impressive in high school, proved to be even more devastating against collegiate competition. With 200 meters remaining, Sarah moved to the outside and began her sustained drive to the finish. She passed runner after runner, her form remaining smooth and controlled even as her competitors began to show the strain of the brutal pace. In the final 50 meters, she found herself in contention for the victory against athletes she had only read about in track and field magazines. The finish was closer than any race Sarah had ever experienced. She crossed the line in second place, just 0.03 of a second behind Lisa Martinez, a senior from Arizona State who was ranked 5th nationally in the 1,500 meters. Sarah's time of 4 minutes and 18.67 seconds was not only a massive personal best, it was the fastest ever run by a University of Colorado freshman. Dr. Walsh's reaction was carefully controlled, but Sarah could see the excitement in her coach's eyes. That, Dr. Walsh said as they watched the results being posted, was the race of someone who belongs at this level. You didn't just run fast, you raced intelligently against experienced competitors and nearly won. That performance tells me we're going to have a very interesting 4 years ahead of us. The local media attention following Sarah's breakthrough race was significant, but manageable. Colorado's track and field program had a tradition of developing distance running talent, and the local sports reporters were familiar with recognizing and covering emerging stars. Sarah handled the interviews with the same composure she had shown in her racing, deflecting praise to her coaches and teammates while expressing genuine excitement about her continued development. As the fall season progressed, Sarah's training began to reflect her new status as a serious contender for national-level honors. Dr. Walsh increased her weekly mileage and introduced more sophisticated training techniques, including lactate threshold runs and advanced interval sessions that pushed Sarah's physiological systems in ways they had never been challenged before. The altitude training that had initially seemed like such an obstacle began to reveal its benefits as Sarah's body adapted to the reduced oxygen availability. When she traveled to sea-level competitions, she found herself with significantly more aerobic power than she had possessed before arriving in Colorado. Her recovery between hard efforts improved dramatically, and her ability to sustain fast paces over longer distances increased noticeably. Sarah's academic performance remained strong throughout her first semester, though the balance between training, competition, and studies required constant attention and adjustment. She discovered that her disciplined approach to athletic training translated well to academic preparation, and she developed study habits that maximized her limited available time. The breakthrough performance that truly announced Sarah's arrival as an elite collegiate athlete came at the NCAA Indoor Championships during her freshman year. Dr. Walsh had entered her in the 800-meter event, returning to the distance where she had first found success. The field included the defending champion and several All-Americans, making it one of the strongest competitions Sarah had ever faced. The race strategy Dr. Walsh developed was designed to play to Sarah's strengths while accounting for her relative inexperience at this level of competition. She would sit in the middle of the pack through 400 meters, move into striking position with 300 meters remaining, and then rely on her powerful finishing kick to carry her home. The early pace was conservative by elite standards, with the field passing 400 meters in 62 seconds. Sarah positioned herself perfectly, staying relaxed in sixth place, while keeping all the major contenders in sight. She felt controlled and confident, her breathing easy despite the championship atmosphere and capacity crowd. At 600 meters, the race began in earnest. The defending champion, Ashley Davis from Stanford, made the first significant move, surging to the front and immediately opening a gap on the field. Several other contenders responded, and Sarah found herself momentarily boxed in by runners on both sides. This was the moment Dr. Walsh had prepared her for during countless training sessions. Instead of panicking or forcing her way through traffic, Sarah remained patient and looked for her opportunity. With 250 meters remaining, a gap opened to her right, and she moved decisively into clear running room. The final 200 meters became a showcase for Sarah's natural speed and tactical maturity. She moved through the field with smooth acceleration, passing runner after runner as the finish line approached. With 50 meters to go, only Ashley Davis remained ahead of her, and Sarah could see that the defending champion was beginning to tie up from her aggressive early move. Sarah's finishing kick proved to be superior. In the final 30 meters, she pulled alongside Davis and then edged ahead, crossing the finish line with a new personal best time of 2 minutes and 6.34 seconds. The time was not only fast enough to win her first NCAA title, it was the fastest ever run by a freshman in championship competition. The victory celebration was emotional for everyone involved in Sarah's development. Dr. Walsh, typically reserved in her reactions, allowed herself a moment of visible pride as she embraced her freshman champion. Sarah's family had traveled from California to witness the race, and the image of her mother crying tears of joy in the stands became one of the defining photos of the championship meet. But perhaps the most meaningful response came from Sarah's high school coach, Coach Williams, who had been following her college career closely from afar. "When I watch Sarah race now," he told a reporter covering the championships, "I see the same heart and determination that impressed me during that first-time trial. But what's different is the confidence and tactical sophistication. She's become a complete runner." The success of her freshman year brought new opportunities and challenges. Sarah was invited to compete in several high-profile summer track meets against professional athletes, providing her with exposure to the post-collegiate level of the sport. These experiences were educational rather than immediately successful, but they gave Sarah a clear picture of what would be required to compete professionally after college. Dr. Walsh carefully managed Sarah's increased profile and the attention that came with her success. "It's important that you enjoy this moment," she counseled. "But remember that this is just the beginning. You have 3 more years here, and each one will bring new challenges and opportunities for growth." Sarah's sophomore year brought increased expectations, but also greater confidence in her abilities. She had proven that she could compete with the best collegiate runners in the country, and her training reflected a new level of sophistication and intensity. Dr. Walsh introduced altitude chambers and environmental training techniques that pushed the boundaries of legal performance enhancement. The academic challenges also intensified as Sarah moved into more advanced biology courses and began preparing for the medical college admission test. The balance between athletics and academics became increasingly delicate, requiring careful planning and unwavering commitment to both areas. Her signature race of sophomore year came at the Pac-10 Championships, where she attempted something that few middle-distance runners had ever accomplished at the collegiate level. Dr. Walsh had entered her in both the 800 meters and the 1500 meters, with finals scheduled just 2 days apart. The 800-meter race came first, and Sarah's approach was aggressive from the start. Rather than relying on her finishing kick, she took the lead at 400 meters and dared the field to stay with her through a blistering pace. The strategy was risky but perfectly executed, resulting in a dominant victory and a new meet record of 2 minutes and 4.89 seconds. 2 days later, despite legs that were still recovering from the 800-meter effort, Sarah lined up for the 1,500-meter final. The double attempt was unprecedented for a Colorado athlete, and Dr. Walsh had prepared multiple race scenarios depending on how Sarah felt during the warm-up. The 1,500-meter race required completely different tactics from the 800. Sarah sat patiently in the middle of the pack through the early stages, conserving energy and waiting for her opportunity to strike. With 600 meters remaining, she moved into contention, and with 300 meters to go, she unleashed the finishing kick that had become her trademark. Her victory in the 1,500 meters, coming just 48 hours after her 800-meter triumph, sent shockwaves through the collegiate distance running community. The double victory was unprecedented in conference championship history, and it established Sarah as the most versatile middle-distance runner in the nation. The success brought professional opportunities that Dr. Walsh helped Sarah navigate carefully. Several agents approached her about signing professional contracts, and shoe companies expressed interest in endorsement deals. The attention was flattering, but also potentially distracting from her primary goals of education and continued athletic development. The professional opportunities will always be there if you continue to improve, Dr. Walsh advised. But you only get one chance at a college education and the unique environment for development that we can provide here. Stay focused on the process, and the results will take care of themselves. Sarah's junior year was marked by a shift in focus toward longer distances and international competition. Dr. Walsh believed that Sarah's physiology and tactical strengths were better suited to 1,500 meters and potentially even longer distances. The transition required adjustments in training and racing strategy, but it opened up new possibilities for post-collegiate success. The highlight of her junior year came at the World University Games, where Sarah represented the United States in international competition for the first time. The experience of wearing the USA uniform and competing against athletes from around the world was transformative, providing Sarah with a glimpse of what might be possible beyond her collegiate career. Her bronze medal performance in the 1,500 meters at the World University Games was notable not just for the result, but for the way she handled the pressure of international competition. Racing against athletes who had been training professionally for years, Sarah demonstrated the tactical maturity and competitive toughness that suggested she could succeed at the highest levels of the sport. As Sarah entered her senior year at Colorado, the question was no longer whether she would pursue professional running after graduation, but rather which opportunities would provide the best platform for continued development. The shy girl who had been mocked for her worn shoes had evolved into one of the most promising middle-distance runners in the world. But more than her athletic achievements, Sarah had developed into a confident young woman who understood the value of education, hard work, and staying true to her principles. The mockery that had once threatened to break her spirit had instead become the foundation for an unshakable belief in her own potential. The college years had been about much more than running fast times or winning championships. They had been about discovering what she was truly capable of when given the opportunity to develop her talents in a supportive environment. As she prepared for her final collegiate season and the decisions that would shape her post-graduation life, Sarah knew that whatever came next, she was ready for the challenge. As Sarah's senior year at the University of Colorado began with a decision that would fundamentally alter the trajectory of her athletic career. After extensive discussions with Dr. Walsh and her academic advisors, she made the choice to defer medical school acceptance for 2 years to pursue professional running. The decision was both thrilling and terrifying, representing a leap of faith in her own potential that would have been unthinkable just 5 years earlier. The transition from collegiate to professional athletics brought immediate changes to every aspect of Sarah's life. She signed with a management company that specialized in developing middle-distance runners, and for the first time in her life, running became not just her passion, but her profession. The financial security provided by her endorsement deal with a major shoe company allowed her to focus entirely on training without the distractions of part-time employment or academic obligations. Her new coach, David Morrison, was a former Olympic champion who had transitioned successfully into developing the next generation of elite runners. David's training philosophy emphasized the mental aspects of performance as much as physical preparation, and he immediately identified areas where Sarah could improve her race tactics and competitive strategy. "You have exceptional natural talent and tremendous heart," David told Sarah during their first technical session together. "But at the professional level, those qualities alone aren't enough. Every athlete you'll face has talent and determination. What separates the good professionals from the great ones is the ability to think tactically during races and to execute strategic plans under extreme pressure." The professional racing circuit exposed Sarah to a level of competition that dwarfed even the most elite collegiate meets. Her first professional race, the Diamond League meet in Eugene, Oregon, featured a field that included Olympic medalists, world record holders, and seasoned professionals who had been competing at this level for over a decade. The experience was humbling but educational. Sarah finished 7th in the 1500 meters with a time that would have won most collegiate competitions, but which left her nearly 4 seconds behind the winner. The gap between collegiate excellence and professional competitiveness was larger than she had anticipated, but it also provided clear targets for improvement. "That race was exactly what we needed," David explained as they reviewed video footage of the competition. "You learn what it feels like to race at this level, and now we know specifically what areas we need to address in training. The gap isn't about natural ability. It's about experience, tactics, and the mental game." Sarah's training regime as a professional athlete was unlike anything she had experienced previously. The volume and intensity were certainly greater, but more significantly, every aspect of her preparation was scrutinized and optimized. She worked with a sports scientist who monitored her physiological responses to training, a nutritionist who designed meal plans tailored to her specific metabolic needs, and a sports psychologist who helped her develop mental skills for high-pressure situations. The attention to detail was extraordinary. Her sleep patterns were monitored and optimized. Her hydration was tracked throughout each day, and even her recovery sessions were planned with scientific precision. The level of support was both empowering and occasionally overwhelming, requiring adjustments in how she thought about training and competition. But perhaps the most significant change was the shift in focus from simply running fast to racing strategically against the world's best athletes. David introduced Sarah to advanced tactical concepts that went far beyond anything she had learned in college. They studied video footage of international races, analyzing the decision-making processes of elite competitors, and identifying patterns that could inform Sarah's own racing strategies. At this level, David explained during one of their tactical sessions, races are often won and lost in moments that happen too quickly for conscious thought. You need to develop instinctive responses to different racing situations so that when opportunities present themselves, you can react immediately without hesitation. Sarah's breakthrough performance as a professional came at the U.S. Championships, 8 months after turning professional. The race was critical not just for her confidence, but for her qualification prospects for the World Championships. Only the top 3 finishers would earn spots on the national team, and the field included several established stars who had represented the United States at multiple major championships. The 1,500-meter final featured a tactical race that played perfectly to Sarah's strengths. The early pace was conservative, with the field bunched tightly together through 800 meters. Sarah positioned herself in the middle of the pack, staying relaxed while monitoring the movements of the established stars around her. At 700 meters, the race exploded into action. Shannon Riley, the defending world champion, made a sudden surge that immediately strung out the field. Several athletes responded aggressively, but Sarah remained patient, trusting the race plan she and David had developed. With 400 meters remaining, Sarah was in 5th place, seemingly out of contention for one of the 3 qualifying spots. But she had been in this position countless times before, and her confidence in her finishing speed was absolute. At 300 meters, she moved to the outside and began her sustained drive to the front. The final 200 meters showcased everything Sarah had learned about professional racing. She moved efficiently through traffic, avoided getting boxed in, and timed her finishing kick perfectly. With 50 meters remaining, She had moved into third place and was still gaining ground on the leaders. Sarah's finishing speed proved to be superior to athletes who had been competing professionally for years. In the final 30 meters, she passed both Shannon Riley and veteran competitor Amanda Torres, crossing the finish line in first place with a new personal best time of 4 minutes and 2.67 seconds. The time was not only fast enough to win, it was the fastest ever run by an American woman on home soil. The victory celebration was emotional for everyone who had been part of Sarah's journey. Her family had traveled from California to witness what they hoped would be her qualification for the World Championships, and they were overwhelmed by her dominant performance against the established stars of American middle-distance running. Coach David Morrison's reaction was characteristically understated but deeply meaningful. That race, he told reporters afterward, was the performance of someone who has arrived at the elite level. Sarah didn't just win because she ran fast. She won because she raced intelligently against experienced competitors and executed her race plan perfectly under tremendous pressure. The World Championships in Budapest represented Sarah's first major international competition as a professional athlete. The experience of competing in a championship atmosphere with athletes from over 200 countries was unlike anything she had previously encountered. The scale of the event, the media attention, and the level of competition all exceeded her expectations. Sarah's preparation for the World Championships was meticulous. She and David traveled to Budapest 3 weeks early to acclimate to the time zone and train on the championship track. They studied video footage of all the major contenders, developing specific tactical plans for different race scenarios that might develop. The heats and semifinals went according to plan, with Sarah advancing to the final as one of the faster qualifiers. Her times were solid but not spectacular, reflecting the conservative approach she and David had decided upon for her first World Championships. The goal was to reach the final and gain experience rather than to pursue a medal in her debut. The final brought together the 12 fastest 1,500-meter runners in the world, including the defending Olympic champion, the world record holder, and several athletes who had been dominating the event for the better part of a decade. Sarah was clearly among the least experienced athletes in the field, but her recent performances had earned her respect from her competitors and media attention as a potential dark horse for a medal. The race unfolded differently than any of the scenarios Sarah and David had prepared for. Instead of the tactical, slowly developing race they had expected, the pace was fast from the start. The field went through 800 meters in 2:10, a pace that would require a final 400 meters of 52 seconds to break the world record. Sarah found herself in unfamiliar territory, running much faster early in the race than she had ever attempted in competition. But rather than panicking or abandoning her race plan entirely, she made real-time adjustments that demonstrated her growing maturity as a tactical racer. At 1,000 meters, she was in 7th place, but perfectly positioned for the final drive. The leaders had established a significant gap, but Sarah could see that several of them were already showing signs of distress from the aggressive early pace. When the inevitable slowdown came, she would be ready to capitalize. The final 400 meters of Sarah's first World Championship final was a masterpiece of tactical racing and finishing speed. As the early leaders began to fade, Sarah moved smoothly through the field, her relaxed running style contrasting sharply with the labored efforts of athletes who had pushed too hard early in the race. With 200 meters remaining, Sarah found herself in medal contention against athletes she had only watched on television just 2 years earlier. Her finishing kick, which had been devastating against American competition, proved to be world-class against the best athletes from every continent. In the final 50 meters, Sarah moved into 2nd place behind Faith Kipyegon, the Kenyan world record holder who was running the race of her life. Sarah's time of 3 minutes and 58.43 seconds was not only a massive personal best, it was the fastest ever run by an American woman and made her the 7th fastest performer in the history of the event. The silver medal ceremony was an emotional culmination of Sarah's journey from unknown high school athlete to world championship medalist. As she stood on the podium listening to the national anthem, she thought about all the people who had contributed to this moment. Her mother, who had worked multiple jobs to support her dreams, Coach Williams, who had first believed in her potential, Dr. Walsh, who had developed her talent in college, and David Morrison, who had guided her transition to professional athletics. But, perhaps most significantly, Sarah thought about the girl she had been just 7 years earlier, the teenager who had been mocked for her worn shoes and humble background. That girl could never have imagined standing on a world championship podium, having just run a time that established her as one of the fastest middle-distance runners in history. The medal opened doors that Sarah had never dared to imagine. She was invited to compete in the most prestigious track meets around the world, and her agent fielded offers from multiple professional training groups who wanted to build their programs around her continued development. The financial security provided by appearance fees and prize money allowed her to train with complete focus and to support her family in ways that seemed impossible just a few years earlier. But more than the material benefits, Sarah's success had a broader impact that extended far beyond her personal achievements. Her story became an inspiration to young athletes from similar backgrounds who saw in her journey proof that extraordinary success was possible regardless of circumstances or early opportunities. Schools across the country invited Sarah to speak to young athletes about pursuing dreams despite obstacles. Her message was always the same. Talent without opportunity is meaningless, but when opportunity presents itself, preparation and determination can overcome any obstacle. She encouraged young people to ignore the voices that told them they didn't belong and to focus instead on the work required to prove those voices wrong. Sarah's athletic career continued to flourish in the years following her world championship medal. She qualified for and competed in 2 Olympic Games, winning a bronze medal in the 1500 meters at her second Olympic appearance. Her personal best times improved steadily, and she spent 3 years ranked among the top 5 1,500-meter runners in the world. Eventually, as her competitive career wound down, Sarah returned to her original plan of attending medical school. The discipline and mental toughness she had developed through elite athletic competition served her well in her medical training, and she specialized in sports medicine with a focus on helping young athletes navigate the challenges of high-level competition. Dr. Sarah Martinez opened her practice in her hometown, creating a full-circle return to the community where her journey had begun. Her clinic specialized in treating young athletes and providing the kind of comprehensive support that had been crucial to her own development. She worked with athletes from all backgrounds, but she took special pride in identifying and nurturing talent among young people who might otherwise lack opportunities. On the wall of her office hung 2 items that served as daily reminders of her journey. The first was her World Championship silver medal, a symbol of what was possible when talent, opportunity, and determination aligned. The second was a photo from her first high school race, showing a nervous teenager in worn running shoes lined up against athletes who seemed to have every advantage. Between these 2 images was the story of transformation that had become Sarah's life mission to share with others. The girl who had been mocked for not belonging had not only found her place among the world's elite athletes, she had redefined what was possible for someone from her background and circumstances. The laughter that had once threatened to break her spirit had instead become the foundation for an unbreakable determination to prove that excellence could emerge from anywhere. Sarah's story served as proof that the most powerful response to mockery was not anger or resentment, but the quiet confidence that came from turning doubt into motivation and obstacles into opportunities. Years later, when young athletes visited her clinic struggling with their own confidence and facing their own critics, Dr. Sarah Martinez would tell them the same thing she had learned that first day on the track. The only opinion that truly mattered was their own belief in what they could accomplish if they refused to quit. The girl who had ended the laughter with a record-breaking performance had grown into a woman who helped others find their own voices in a world that too often told them to stay silent. And in that transformation, Sarah had discovered that the greatest victory was not the medals on her wall, but the knowledge that her journey had made it easier for others to believe in their own impossible dreams.